Hello everybody and welcome to a Piggy Theory video. Today we're going to be going over my theory on just who T.S.P might be. I've narrowed it down to 2 options and we're going to talk about that later today. We're also going to talk about how chapter 12 might not be the end of Piggy and how there could be more coming up in the future. Let's get right into it! So I want to talk about a theory that Creecraft released yesterday, well maybe 2 days ago, that a lot of people are talking about. Creecraft talks about how Bunny lied to us back at the end of Metro, where she says Mr. P gave her a potion and she drank it. He cites that Mr. P only made 7 potions and that he gave them to Doggy, Barry, Foxy, the Pig family, and of course Mrs. Gazelle the teacher. And that could totally be true if it weren't for the fact that we have no evidence that Barry did drink a potion. The evidence that people are citing for Barry's infection all comes from the fan Wikipedia page, and I'm talking about the fan Wikipedia page. Minitoon doesn't have anything to do with this. This is only us players that are writing this. It says, after waking up, Bunny informs a player that Mr. P is waiting on the roof and the hospital isn't safe anymore because Barry, the doctor, had been infected with the potion. There is no mention of that in the hospital chapter. And last time I checked around the hospital, I didn't see any potion bottles lying around like in school or the forest. I mean, of course it's possible, but I say once again, there is no evidence in the hospital that Barry actually drank a potion. Why would they write this on the Wikipedia article? Remember, we didn't know before this chapter that there were other ways to get infected. Right now, all we'd seen is people drinking potions to become infected. Then the only thing they'd assume when writing a Wikipedia article for chapter 6 is that Barry drank the potion. So the theory that T.S.P could be the 7 potions is very questionable here, because all the people who had those potions are infected, except for Bunny, who seemingly either died if it's a ghost or didn't end up becoming infected if she was a shadow. Now, possibly she could have lied and she could be T.S.P after all, but it doesn't really make sense.
Well, actually, I just thought about it. Notice how T.S.P doesn't show up until after Bunny disappears in the metro. I'm just saying.
But Bunny wouldn't have had time to leave Foxy there, so yeah, it's probably not true. And one more thing, I also want to talk about George. Now, every theory I've talked about, I've always emphasized a massively big point that George had red eyes in his missing poster. And it seems, in one of the most recent updates, Minitoon has removed the missing poster with the red eyes from the gallery. So I think that basically confirms that George definitely was never infected. I think Minitoon just forgot to remove that one because he removed the one at the front of the gallery. So I just wanted to point that out there. George is likely okay. But let's get on to the meat of the story. After this update, for some reason, a lot of people have been saying Mrs. P is dead just because of that note that said Mr. P looked for her and she's gone like Bunny. But by gone, he could actually mean like disappeared, like they're not there anymore. Not that they died, because everything points to Mrs. P being alive. That note tells us that Mrs. P was in the forest, since Mr. P mentions that he searched for her there. So if Mr. P and Mrs. P were in the forest and Mr. P left for the school, leaving Mrs. P in the forest, that lines up with the events of chapter 5. Now, I always thought there was something odd with the cave in chapter 4. If you investigate the cave there, it tells us there were 2 beds and a separate campfire, likely where Mr. P and Mrs. P slept. Now, here's where things go a bit crazy. We know Mrs. P was in the city. We can see by her shadow in chapter 9, and she wouldn't be a ghost because the lights are on and she's casting a shadow on the windows from the light. I don't think a ghost would cast a shadow on a window. I think we can disregard her being a ghost there. And also because of this, like the last theory, I'm almost 100% sure that the note in Mall, when it talks about a female breaking out but she couldn't have gone far, I'm almost certain this actually refers to Mrs. P. Where else would she be hiding but in the city? Because the mall's in the city, so she couldn't have gone far, so she's hiding in a city apartment. It just makes sense. But now we know exactly who was in the forest with us. Mr. P, Mrs. P, Bunny, because she was with Mr. P and Mrs. P, I assume, Doggy, and T.S.P. We can disregard Bunny and Doggy since they're dead, although I'm still betting on Bunny being a silhouette, which would definitely change the theory a bit, so I'm just gonna assume she's gone for now. But if she does come back, I do think there's like a 40% chance she's T.S.P after all. And we know T.S.P was in the forest because in the note in Carnival, he says Doggy and Foxy got what was coming to them. He did that to Doggy and Foxy. He made Doggy drink the potion all the way in forest, so he was definitely there. So, 3 3 people were in the forest, other than us. Mr. P, Mrs. P, T.S.P. Now, I think T.S.P is one of them. Unless it's some other random character that we don't even know yet, that would be a really, really odd reveal if it turned out to be just some random guy. But everybody, I think T.S.P is Mrs. P. To realize this, we need to go all the way back to the beginning and look at some things that some of you may have forgotten. She's really sick. I need to help her any way I can. Mr. P. There's only ever been one character associated with Mr. P. Everything up until chapter 8 has been pointing to Mrs. P being the one that Mr. P was trying to cure. She's the only one that has a close tie with Mr. P, so we can safely assume she was the first one sick. But also remember this from Metro. Patient 0 was given substance 128. Patient has been restoring strength, but also displaying signs of aggression. So patient 0 is usually referred to as the first person to contract a certain illness. So it's highly likely that she's patient 0 and not the Peppa Pig family who are test subjects. So if she was patient 0 and suffered the effects of the infection, how did Mr. P get her to the forest? How did she get out and into the city? How did she break out of the mall, assuming it was her? Well, we know Mr. P made 7 potions, and those are all accounted for if we do assume that Bunny drank one. And we can even say if Barry drank one. Then that means Substance 128 wasn't a potion. Substance 128 was something different. And what if Substance 128 worked a bit differently from the potions we've seen? What if it could alter the mind in a different way? We see the other potions alter the mind of other animals, not allowing them to control their actions. But we saw Mrs. P, or Patient 0, display signs of aggression while restoring strength. Notice how they mention signs of aggression. What if this substance takes much longer to start affecting someone than the actual potions? This explains how T.S.P doesn't appear at all until chapter 8, the carnival. Mrs. P has slowly been falling under the effects of a different potion. And also I do want to point out, T.S.P was in Potato Land, and the only 2 people that we've seen associated with Potato Land are Mrs. P, because we see a picture there, Mr. P, obviously, because we thought Mr. P was a bad guy there, and then Pedro and Zizzy as well, because they did find us there. No one else has been associated with Potato Land besides Foxy, but he's gone. What if Mrs. P kept her wits, but just grew more aggressive, grew more sadistic? The substance wants her to infect more people, just like the zombies we know. So she is driven to, say, recruit more members. And finally, it can all be explained by that insanely important note in the mall. Don't trust the SI. Don't trust the sister? Minitoon has clearly been trying to avoid telling us what Mr. P's relation to her is. So what if T.S.P was the sister potato? Although some other ideas that I've seen thrown out, the 7 potions, it could definitely be some sort of organization. But remember, all the people who had the 7 potions are infected, so I don't really see how they're gonna be plotting or anything. And once again, that is all assuming that we've actually met T.S.P and that they're one of the people that we know about that exist in the story, and they're not just like some outside random super organization like Super Potatoes gonna just show up out of nowhere and punch us right in the chest and that's the end. But you know, even if they are someone we haven't met yet, I think we're gonna have plenty of time to meet them. Because everybody, I don't think chapter 12 is going to be the end of our story. So I've been saying this for a while, but each chapter just gives us more and more questions while only providing a few answers. Let me just give you a list of the vital questions that will need to be explained in the final chapter, chapter 12. Minitoon, why was Mrs. P sick? Why did Mr. P make 7 potions and infect those people to make the world a better place? Why is Mrs. P in the city? Why did Mr. P abandon us on the roof of the hospital and give Bunny, one of his friends, a potion? Who is the SI? Why do we see Bunny's ghost / shadow in the outpost? Why did we fall sick and hallucinate Doggy? And that's not even talking about T.S.P yet. We haven't even met him. You know, the bad guy of this entire story? And then we need to explain his backstory. How he met Doggy and Foxy. What his plans are. Why he wants to recruit a giant organization. And finally, then, after all of that, he needs to give us a whole conclusion to the story. That alone would take an entire ending cutscene. I don't think he's gonna have time to explain all this. The conclusion alone will probably take up the entire final cutscene, and that's not even with T.S.P. there. Here's where I get a pretty good idea that there is more Piggy incoming. There are two highly likely endings, only two. Ending number one, we find the cure and travel around to cure everyone. This alone would need an entire cutscene to explain, like I've been talking about, and that's without including T.S.P. or answering any questions, because it needs us to actually find a cure. We've heard nothing of a cure yet to this infection. We would have to find it, make it, spread it, all in one chapter. So, that said, if Minitoon goes down this path, I think the story will continue for a couple more chapters. I reckon chapter 12, the big reveal, we find out who T.S.P. is. Maybe Mr. P sacrifices himself or something, and we need to escape, possibly. There might be a hint about us being able to find a cure. And then for the next few chapters, we're gonna be running around trying to stop T.S.P.'s evil plan that he hasn't even revealed yet. You don't leave the reveal of the plan till the end. You always put it in the middle of the movie. Now, I know Minitoon's confirmed 12 chapters, but that was long ago. Bear with me. Number two, the second option of what path Minitoon could go down for the ending is we defeat T.S.P., but need to make a new life in a world of infected characters. What if there is no cure? This would be a sadder ending and wouldn't require as much time for the cutscene, which makes sense because chapter 12 won't be able to do everything at once. But that would open up the possibility for an entire new story. The story of a search for the cure with our friends. A new bad guy could pop up. However, I think if Minitoon wants to wrap up the Piggy story, he would definitely take the first route. It's a much happier ending and it's Roblox, come on. It's not The Walking Dead. But why would he want to wrap up the story anyway? Think about it. As of right now, Piggy is sitting on 170,000 players. 70% more than Bloxburg itself. Bloxburg is the second highest apart from Adopt Me. It is destroying games such as Jailbreak and Mad City, even when they were released. I don't remember their numbers reaching this level and staying at this level for so long. He could expand the game into an entire franchise. Why would Minitoon want to end it all here when there's so much ahead of him in the future? Well, I don't think he will. What if he were to continue his hit idea? What if he adapted another type of game? After all, Piggy was adapted from Granny. What if he wanted to go, say, the FNAF route? Five Nights at Piggy's, or Slender Man, Slender Piggy. He could put a fresh spin on any of these, and it would stop the hype from dying down and give us some brand new stories from the universe with more mechanics. But that's just a theory, a suggestion review. Oh, not today? Well, let me know what you guys think. Do you think Minitoon will end Piggy on chapter 12? What are your theories for what's gonna happen in chapter 12? There's so much that could happen. Bunny could be T.S.P. Mrs. P could be T.S.P. Mr. Potato could be T.S.P. That's a whole nother theory I could talk about, and I do think it's totally possible. Please sub, more coming tomorrow. And most of all, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.